Make a start.
Recording in progress.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد طه الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهك الكريم اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من حال أهل النار لله تعالى. I start by praising Allah, the Exalted. I ask Him to raise the rank of our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, and to protect the nation of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam from whatever he feared for it. And may Allah, the Exalted, grant us all the sincerest of intentions and the reward for our good deeds in the hereafter. Thereafter, we reached the penultimate lesson of this series, inshallah, where we're going to start section 15 then. The author is coming towards the end of his advice to his son, where he's been giving him a series of beneficial words and pieces of guidance to direct him to be the best Muslim that he can be, to attain the highest rank that he can possibly get in the hereafter, and ultimately able to achieve safety on the day of judgment. And so we have before us then a blueprint for that, a guidance for that, taking into account some of the experiences of many of the scholars of the past, which the author, rahimahullah, did not fail to allude to and highlight for us, to show as well that these pieces of advice that are being given to us are attainable by the average Muslim. And the difference between those who are on that path and attaining those high levels is the level of determination of a person and the choices that we are making in our lives. Many times that's the difference, because it's not that somebody else, for example, has superhuman ability or extra time in the day or less stress or responsibilities for one of us to compare and say, well, my life is different, or I'm not in the same category, or they don't have the responsibilities that I have. People had this in the past. If anything, life is much easier now to do many mundane and everyday things which were much more challenging and difficult in the past. So, point being then, there isn't really an excuse for a person falling short, at the very least to attain safety in the hereafter. And as per the advice of the author, we shouldn't be falling short of not just being safe in the hereafter, but attaining those high ranks and upper levels of paradise. May Allah Ta'ala facilitate that for us. It's an opportune time for one to take advantage of the lessons and the piece of advice in this text, especially on the eve of Ramadan, where a person is hoping to up their level and determination and efforts so as to acquire the good deeds and gain a huge amount of reward. And so in section 15, the author, rahimahullah, starts to say, وعليك بكتاب منهاج المريدين فإنه يعلمك السلوك فاجعله جليسك ومعلمك. So the author, rahimahullah, in this particular chapter, which is relatively short, mentions several books that he authored, that he is advising his son to go on to read and benefit from. And he mentions what those books are specific to in terms of their field of religious knowledge and their specialty. So he said, read the book Minhaj al-Muridin. He is directing his son to go ahead and read this book of the author. And this is a book that clarifies the methodology and the path taken by those who seek the acceptance of Allah in all aspects of their lives. And in particular, the internal aspects and the deeds of the heart. For in this book, the author, rahimahullah, Ibnul Jawziyy, that is, summarized the famous book of Al-Imam Al-Ghazali called Ihya'u Ulumuddin. It's a very beneficial but vast book. And so the author summarized that book in this text of his, on this book, Minhaj al-Muridin, while preserving the main intended points of the original book. So he tells him it will teach you the proper behavior, how to conduct yourself in all aspects of your life. And as we said, in particular, how you should make your heart be, how it should feel, how it should think, the processes that it should be going through, the levels of sincerity, among other things that are required for a person to have in their heart to attain those upper ranks. We find that in this particular text. He said, make it your companion and teacher. Who is a person's companion? Someone who you spend a deal of time with. If you spend, a one-off appointment with someone, you visit someone once, they're not your companion. But someone who you spend regular time with and a lot of time with, they're considered to be your companion. So he's saying, make this book your companion. That is, read it, stick to it, adhere to it, and make it your teacher, meaning learn from the meanings of the text within. So this is one of the books that the author is directing his son towards. He said, وَتَلَمَّحْ كِتَابَ صَيْدِ الْخَاطِرِ فَإِنَّكَ تَقَعُ بِوَاقِعَاتٍ تُصْلِحُ لَكَ أَمْرَ دِينِكَ وَدُنْيَاكَ. He said, look at the book Saydul Khatir. You will see situations in there, events and occurrences in there that will be good for your living and religion. Things that are good for your dunya and things that are good for your religion. So this book, Saydul Khatir, is another among the beneficial texts of Al-Imam Ibnul Jawziyy, rahimahullahu ta'ala. Remember, he himself said to his son, I've authored 100 books, while the reality was he authored after that many more. And the types of books that he was authoring were very beneficial. And remember, we said he was someone who put the effort in to master the different fields of religious knowledge. So whatever field he kind of put his mind to, he excelled in it and authored great works in those fields. He said, وَتَحْفَظْ كِتَابْ جُنَّةَ النَّظَرِ أو كتاب جنة النظر فإنه يكفي في تلقيح فهمك للفقه. He said, memorize the book جنة النظر. And he directed his son before, if you remember, to memorizing, especially the mutun of texts. And so again, for a student of knowledge, it should be that we memorize certain texts. Not necessarily absolutely everything that we come across, but the point being that we should not completely rely on just having made notes of things, whether physical notes, pen, paper, having typed up something, recordings and the like. These are good. These are beneficial that you've got something to resort back to and refer back to and revise from. But what do you have with you right now? How much knowledge do you possess in your heart? This is going to depend on how much you memorize. And it's not necessarily that you sit, for example, in a room one day and just memorize lesson after lesson after lesson, for example, or just repeat something 20, 30, 40 times in one session. Yeah, that's one way of memorizing. But another is to regularly review. That when you go back to a lesson that you took, that you attended, and you made notes, you go back a second and a third and a fourth time and revise it and read it in a way that at the least you're close to memorizing it. You remember it. Because if you don't, then you lose it. You don't retain it. You don't have it. If you don't have it, you can't benefit from it. So how is it that we are going to retain a continued benefit from the knowledge that we learn, from the sessions that we attend? Many of you attend several sessions of religious knowledge each week. How much of them do we remember the next day, the next week, a month down the line? Those of you who, let's say, attended the sessions of this particular text that we went through, if one was to be asked in 6 months, how much you remember of that beneficial and great book that you attended and listened to and paid attention to? In the time, you paid attention to it. But if someone was to ask you, to remember that what was mentioned, the different sections, can you recall some of the details within? And it's quite likely that most people, without any sort of revision and review, would struggle. And so it shouldn't be the case. Yeah, I was there and I was in attendance and I benefited from it. But right now, where is that knowledge? It should be then that we memorize and regularly memorize and review. Many of us fall short in that. It's, part of life that we need to spend and make more time for the lessons that we've previously taken and revised so that we don't forget them. One of the brothers who I studied with from Chechnya, he memorized the Quran while he was studying the religious knowledge and the Arabic language. And if he's Chechnyan, Arabic is not his first language, but he memorized the Quran. So he was telling me that in order to retain what he has previously memorized, he needs to revise every single day. Every single day, without fail, he has to revise at least one juz. In Punjabi, they call it ispara. But at least one juz of the Quran every so often. He would need to do like I say, deep review and several juz and the like, so he doesn't forget. And then I said, how long is that going to go on for? He said, for the rest of my life. In order to not forget the Quran, he needs to now revise it for the rest of his life. And that's commitment. Oh, may Allah preserve it for him. But that's effort, though, that's being put in, isn't it? So that one does not forget. So likewise with us, we need to review and revise what we have taken. So it shouldn't always be take, and add, and nothing's being retained. If you imagine you have a container, you want to fill it, pour more and more things in it, but there's a hole at the bottom. You're filling from the top, but it's getting emptied from the bottom. What's going to happen? Eventually, what you filled at the top is eventually going to spill out of the bottom. It won't stay in there. So plug that hole, add bit by bit, revise, review. That is, there is no harm in a person, for example, having a session in their week where this is just for revising what I've taken. Lessons that I took 5 years ago, 5 months ago, 5 weeks ago, just to sit and spend time. There is even reward in you revising and reviewing sessions of knowledge you took before. Reward. So it's not that you always only need to attend a new session to get a reward or benefit. And especially if you've forgotten it, it's like you're taking it again. This is why the scholars mention that if it's the case that you've learned the personal obligatory knowledge, you attended all the sessions, you fulfilled that obligation, you learned that knowledge, but then you forgot it. What does that mean? It means it again becomes an obligation for you to acquire that knowledge, either by attending those sessions again, because it's an obligation, isn't it? Or they said, revising the notes that you had taken of those lessons. How many of us can say we are constantly recalling and retaining all the details of the personal obligatory knowledge? And if not, then it's something good to go back and revise and review those chapters of personal obligatory knowledge. Why is it that many people set up review sessions of Ramadan and fasting just before Ramadan starts? Because sometimes they forget certain details. What happens if I forget my intention at night? How long do I have in the morning? Is there a case that I can make my intention in the morning? Is there a difference of opinion among the scholars? What were the details if I ate while forgetting? If I needed to take my inhaler, what does that happen to my fast? Do I need to make it up? That these are details that come under personal obligatory knowledge. If you've forgotten it, you need to go and revise it. Yes, if Ramadan is not in right now, then not necessarily it is obligatory upon you right now, but it should be that you yourself have access to knowledge that you can get to revise what you need to learn again. So the author is saying, memorize the book, Junnatun Nazar. It is enough to inoculate your understanding of fiqh. So this particular book is something that would benefit him in his reviewing and understanding of the rules of jurisprudence, fiqh, purification and prayer and fasting and zakah and the like. ومتى تشاغلت بكتاب الحدائق أطلعك على جمهور الحديث. He said, when you engage in the book Al-Hadaiq, it will tell you about most of the hadith. There's the rulings and what you would need to know about the knowledge of hadith. This is a beneficial book as well that he wrote. He said, وَإِذَا التفت إلى كتاب الكشف أبان لك مستور ما في الصحيحين من الحديث. He said, if you pay attention to the book Al-Kashf, it will disclose to you what was hidden of the two Sahihs of Hadith. Which Sahih is he referring to? Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. These two books are ordered in a particular way by their authors, Al-Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim. May Allah Ta'ala raise their ranks. But there are some hadiths in there that have not been, let's say, sorted in a particular way. They're kind of in there. And so this might make it difficult for some of the inexperienced people to find those particular hadiths if they are searching for them, to get to them. So he's saying then that this is a book that will facilitate that for you, what might be hidden, and also unlock some of the meanings of the hadiths of those books. And so many times there are books in particular that the scholars directed towards these two books. You've got explanations of Sahih al-Bukhari, like what Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, rahimahullah, wrote in Fath al-Bari. You got the explanation of Sahih Muslim by Imam Muslim, may Allah raise their ranks, because they saw benefit in them. So these are two particular books which the Muslims should pay attention to during their lifetimes wherever possible. The scholars mention that the most authentic book on the earth after the Quran is Sahih al-Bukhari, and after that, Sahih Muslim. So there is a lot of available knowledge and benefit in those texts, but clearly these are books that require a degree of help from other scholars in how to understand those hadiths, how to deduce the judgments, how to understand the judgments that might be in there, how to understand certain wordings, the context of the hadiths. These are not, books that a person should necessarily just try to read and figure out for themselves. While beneficial, if it is the case that Allah revealed about the Quran, that many people are guided by it, and yet many become misguided by it because they misunderstand the intended meanings of some of those verses. If that's the Quran, whose wording has not been perverted and nor will, then how about the hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who people have added things to, taken away, made mistakes in typing errors, copying errors, and the like. More so, these books require more attention and precision and accuracy and diligence in order to understand their correct meanings. And so wherever possible, if there is an opportunity to, study those books with a teacher, then don't miss out on that, inshallah. Continuing, he said, وَلَا تَتَشَاغَلَنَّ بِكُتُبِ التَّفَاسِيرِ التي صنفتها الأعاجم وما ترك المغني وزاد المسير لك حاجة في شيء من التفسير وأما ما جمعته لك من كتب الوعظ فلا حاجة لك بعدها إلى زيادة أصلا. He said, do not busy yourself with the books of tafsir written by the ones who interpret the verses in disagreement with the Arabic language. In other words, don't find yourself preoccupied or spending your time with books of tafsir whose authors were not qualified to interpret the Quran, either due to their weakness in the Arabic language. They learned a bit, and then they went to the Quran and said, this verse means this, and this verse means that, and this verse is translated as this, and the like. And many times they give the incorrect intended meanings of many of the verses of the Quran. And such people are many, that they are particularly non-Arabs nowadays, in particular, who learned some Arabic, got a dictionary, and give word for word and literal translations of the Quran, failing to convey the actual intended meanings of those verses. And sometimes without enough background religious knowledge, at times without knowledge of how tafsir even works, how to combine verses, how to interpret verses, what you can use to interpret a verse and understand a verse. that to be a mufassir of the Quran, an interpreter of the Quran, there are conditions. The scholars mentioned parameters that a scholar needs to have in order to interpret a verse of the Quran. Just because someone is knowledgeable in general and perhaps a scholar does not automatically make them a qualified mufassir of the Quran. Not every scholar had a tafsir. The Prophet ﷺ said, he who speaks about a verse of the Quran bi-ra'yihi, from his opinion, then this person is erroneous and sinful. Even if he managed to get to the actual meaning and coincided with the actual meaning, but because he spoke and said, I think this is what this verse means, without knowledge, without going back to a teacher, without looking at what the scholars and the companions said about such verses, then this person has committed a major sin, talking about the Quran without knowledge. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu was once asked about the meaning of a particular verse of the Quran. It was وَفَاكِهَةً وَأَبًّا. Someone asked him, Abu Bakr, I know what fakiha means in this verse. What does wa'abba refer to in this verse? And he said, what earth would hide me and what sky would cover me if I was to speak about the book of Allah without knowledge. This Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu saying this. How would you have then people who are daring to claim, I'll tell you what every verse means, and I know exactly what it means, and relying upon limited knowledge and limited Arabic is very dangerous, especially those who follow them in that and interpret the Quran in ways that they are not qualified to do so. So he said to his son, don't get preoccupied with these types of books, but written by many others. He's not saying that no one is qualified, but especially those he's saying that their meanings don't even agree with the Arabic language. Stay away from them. He said, Al-Mughni and Zadul Masir did not leave out anything you need in tafsir. These two are books of tafsir that were authored by Ibnul Jawziyy himself. One is larger than the other. Both are beneficial. So he's saying you'll find in there what you need. So don't be going to books in which you might find errors. As for what I collected for you in preaching, in wa'z, you have basically no need after it to any addition. Meaning the author, rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on him, was among those who preached the most, gave advice, and books like this is considered to be a book of wa'z, advice. And you've seen how strong he is in that he was among the scholars and among the people that was considered to preach the most and was considered to be among the strongest and most eloquent with his words. So he's saying, I've authored so much for you in wa'z and given much in lessons that you don't need to go left and right after that. Again, he's not doing this to boast, to brag. He's just providing him the reality that there is benefit in the books that he has written, and he's trying to make it feel easier for his son that, look, you don't need to go left and right, you don't need to go shopping, you don't need to go searching. These books are available. They're my books. Go ahead and read in them and benefit from them. You'll find everything you need in them to attain the knowledge that you require. End of that section. We'll start section 16, inshaAllah. The author said, وَكُنْ حَسَنَ الْمُدَارَاتِ لِلْخَلْقِ مَعَ شِدَّةِ الْاِعْتِزَالِ عَنْهُمْ. فإن العزلة راحة من خلطاء السوء ومبقية للوقار. He said, be tactful. This is how one of our teachers has, translated this particular portion of the text. Hassan al-Mudara. We'll explain that, inshallah, what that means in a bit more detail. Be tactful in dealing with people. There is a hadith narrated by Ibn Hibban, who judged it as sahih, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Mudaratun nasi sadaqah. Now, this mudarah that the author has mentioned here, and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam mentioned the hadith, he said, having it with people is sadaqah, form of charity, meaning something through which a person would get reward as it's a good deed. And Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah said in his book Fath al-Bari, which remember we said is the explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari, al-mudaratu min akhlaq al-mu'minin. This particular trait of having al-mudarah is considered among the habits of the pious Muslims. So there's an encouragement here to have this particular trait. What does it refer to here then? What does it mean? Al-mudarah, this word that's used by the author, we find it in the religion and the hadiths and by the scholars, it refers to a person being humble towards the people, meaning opposite of being arrogant. Being humble, showing humility, using soft words when speaking and addressing them, and avoiding roughness when speaking to them, avoiding a type of harshness, a rough tone and manner and demeanor when you are speaking to people. If you imagine, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke to and was around all types of people, family members, students, companions, enemies, those who claimed to like him but deep down did not, those who wanted to kill him, those who mocked him and belittled him, those who used to make fun of him, insult him and call him names. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, did we ever come across in any session of seerah where he flipped out against any of these people, where he used some sort of a rough tone or had a harsh mannerism or used a nasty word in response, raised his voice when he shouldn't have, responded in a way that made it seem like he was not in control of his emotions? No. So this is an example of al-mudarah. And so as a result, that meant that anyone who actually knew the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved to be with him, loved his company, loved the time around him. Whenever he wasn't with them, they used to miss him and long for him. Why? Because of how he was with them. Remember, some of them themselves might have had, rough manners. There were people who, when speaking to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were rude to him, bad-mannered. And sometimes other companions would feel bad that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being addressed like this, being spoken to like this. But he did not respond in kind. You're going to talk to me like that, I'm going to talk to you like that as well. No, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not like that. He was able then to subject everyone with good manners. So this is something that you might call a type of appeasement or pacification, where he was able to be cool and calm and collected and gentle and soft and well-mannered with those around him. And this is something recommended in the religion. And this is different to something that's called al-mudahana. Al-mudahana, the scholars interpreted to mean spending time with a major sinner while showing acceptance for what he is doing without objecting to him. Al-mudahana. And usually this is done to get something out of that person, their favor, some position, being re-invited on stage with them, perhaps some money, some recognition. And that's why this term sometimes is translated even linguistically into English as bootlicking, getting favor with someone, currying favor, lip service, going along with, yeah, that's fine. That sounds okay to me. Yeah, if it's, some people say within the boundaries, you're all right. Or they just put their head down and not object to it. They don't want to kick up a fuss. They don't want to go against this person for one reason or another, for worldly reasons. That's not what we're talking about here. That is something dangerous, and these people are dangerous as well. What we're talking about is something different. Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, was giving advice to one of his students called Yusuf. And among the advice that he gave to him was indulge, meaning be soft and gentle towards the fujjar, the major sinners. They're still Muslims. You don't need to be turning your nose up at them and, pulling a face if you see them and, talking to them in a arrogant tone and the like. Just indulge them, get along with them when you speak to them or see them. وَصَاحِبِ الْأَخْيَارِ, but accompany the elite Muslims. Don't spend time with them and make them your companions. But if you come across them, be cool with them, get along with them, and make your company the pious Muslims. And he also said to the student of his in advice, you should have mudarah, what we mentioned here, or tactfulness in dealing with others, patience, tolerance, good manners, and broad-mindedness with people. That is, overlook certain things that you don't need to make a big deal out of, so that you can get along with people. And he said, along with serious seclusion from them, meaning at times, be secluded from them, because remember we said that there are times where you do need to spend time with others, teaching them, learning from them, ordering them with goodness, forbidding them from prohibitions. So it's not complete seclusion. So he's saying that keep yourself to yourself for the most part, but when you do come across people, be good to them, get along with them, indulge them, speak to them in a good manner. And seclusion is a relief from the bad companions, that you won't have people disturbing your peace, pulling you into potentially bad things and traits and acts. And this also maintains the respect of others, that we don't see this person as often. He's here now. Let's be respectful in his company, for example. If you get too pally with some people, then your presence and continued presence with them makes them lose respect for you. Because you're their pal now. You're boys with them. You see them all the time. You go out with them, you chill with them, you relax with them. You start to, they start to, unfortunately, not necessarily something active or intentional, but you start to lose some of that respect that they should have for you, especially if you are a religious teacher. So remember, it's not completely pull away, but not spending your entire time, socializing with people who are not necessarily doing anything good and religious. So a balance is what is required there. He said, فَإِنَّ الْوَاعِظ خاصة ينبغي له ألا يرى متبذلا ولا ماشيا في السوق ولا ضاحكا ليحسن به الظن فينتفع بوعظه. He said, why should this be the case? He said, for people to think well of him and benefit from his preaching. That is the preacher, the speaker. He said this preacher specifically should not be seen being loose with how he talks and how he acts and the like. Meaning there's no harm in being relaxed, but having a general formality in front of the masses and the students, etc., especially by a scholar, is not a bad thing. Because these are people who you want them to take you seriously. Because many times when you're speaking to them, you're talking about serious things. Working for the hereafter, performing obligations and avoiding sins and repentance and the like. These are the types of lessons that scholars give. So if a person is, loose with how they are in themselves, then sometimes that advice doesn't have the level of impact that you might want it to. Remember, we talked about in the last session that if you're not practicing what you preach yourself, your preaching might fall on deaf ears. Not that it should, because advice is advice, but it's more impactful if you're applying it yourself. He said, or such a person should not be seen walking frequently in the marketplace, because that's not a recommended place to be. So it shouldn't be that always out and about and always shopping and always seen in the market. That's not a good thing. Or laughing often, always cracking up and always seen joking and the like. Because then this type of person, again, the level of benefit that can be taken from them is limited. But just bear in mind that these states that the author is talking about here are more specific to a religious judge or someone like a religious judge, like a scholar. And it does not pertain to all people. But at the same time, there is no harm in striving to have traits like this because they are something recommended in the religion. He said, فإذا اضطررت إلى مخالطة الناس فخالطهم بالحلم عنهم فإنك إن كشفت عن أخلاقهم لم تقدر على مداراتهم. If you were forced to mingle with bad people, which is like an inevitability of life almost, you're not surrounded by awliya, you're not surrounded by pious Muslims and well-mannered Muslims. We're talking just Muslims here. Never mind being around non-Muslims and their bad traits and behaviors, that even among the Muslims, you are going to come across those who aren't the best, aren't the most appropriate mannered and the like. He said, and if you find yourself in a situation like that, at work, in the marketplace, in the butcher's shop, whatever it might be, mingle with them while being patient with them. Don't be, getting too bothered by what they are saying and doing and acting. be patient with that. Understand that they are not necessarily the best of people, but be patient with the manners that they are displaying to you. Because if you don't, the author says, if you expose their bad manners, then you will not be able to be tactful with them. What does he mean by that? That if you are not tactful in how you deal with people, remember, being patient, being soft, being gentle. If you're not that, and you end up bringing out their bad manners, that if you bring yourself to their level in how you speak and address and act, then they'll do that as well and bring out their bad manners. Once they do that, you would not be able to repel their evil and harm from you. But if an ignorant person or a bad-mannered person is acting with their bad manners in how they speak and how they act, then they'll end up harming you in some way. But if you are able to be mindful in how you are with them, you're gentle, you're tactful, you're overlooking, you're pardoning, you retain your cool, you remain patient, you remain soft and gentle, just how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. And this will result in them doing what in turn? Exhibiting good manners. They'll be cool with you as well. They'll be calm with you as well. That when they see that you're patient and you're calm, they will come up to your level. They're bad people inside and bad-mannered inside, but they're seeing you being good and well and gentle and peaceful and calm. So they will react like that in turn, and so you'll be able to get along with them. You'll be able to not be exposed to their bad side. So this is why you need to be what? Patient, have good manners, have al-mudarah, as he's saying. Remember, Ibnul Jawziyy is not keeping things general, being very intricate. When you're alone, how to be. When you're up in the middle of the night, how to be. When you're around people that are good for you, how to be with teachers, with students. And even he's saying how you are with bad people, how to be. Who did he get all of this from? The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for he was our best example, our ultimate role model. This religion of ours did not leave anything or fall short in anything that a person needs to be or needs to have in order to be the perfect person, the perfect Muslim. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in every action and interaction that he had, there was a lesson for us. How he corresponded to his wives, how he corresponded to his companions, how he corresponded to those who spoke to him in a nice way, in a rough way, how he was with his neighbors, how he was with the young, with the old, how he was, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with those that did not want good for him, how he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, used to spend his time, how he used to distribute his time, who he would spend his time with, how he would sit with them, what he would say to them, what's the first thing that he would say, what would he say when he would leave them. So many things that we can learn from our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and scholars like Ibnul Jawziyy rahimahullah put their efforts in to convey that knowledge to us so that we can benefit from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam through words and lessons and texts like this. May Allah Ta'ala raise his rank and enable us to be as compliant as we can with the teachings and methodology of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ameen. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And Allah, the Exalted, knows best.